Welcome to Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast. Join the podcast mogul Phil Better as he interviews successful entrepreneurs that make their living in the digital world. Now, let's join your host, Phil Better, and his special guest today on Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast. It all begins with impact, ladies and gentlemen. That's what is the big thing my guest today talks about. He is a returning guest, so you may remember his docile tones from one of the earlier seasons. The head of Master Talk himself. I'm going to make it a brief intro. Ladies and gentlemen, Brenden. Brenden, thank you so much for being back.
Phil, the pleasure is absolutely mine, and congrats on all the success you've had since then.
Oh, well, I've had some success, but your success is even better. You landed on an amazing podcast just recently. You just dropped that on me before we went live on Entrepreneurs on Fire. So I'm wondering why you're on this like B-level podcast when you were on the granddaddy, the OG of podcasting. But it's always a pleasure to have you on, sir.
Hey, the pleasure is mine, Phil. Thanks for having me.
So when we first had you on, you had just started Master Talk. It was still a relatively smaller channel. And now it's been able to replace your 9-to-5 and you're living life. What's happened in between? Like what's happened since you were last on the podcast to today? What's changed?
For sure, Phil. So when we first talked, which we kind of measured was like late 2020, early 21, I was in a really bad place in my life, even if I didn't give the illusion of it on the podcast. And the reason was because I was side hustling Master Talk for like 20, 30 hours a week. So I was doing podcasts primarily just on weekends because I was working at my corporate gig for like 70, 75 hours a week. So it was wild. I was doing like 90, 100-hour weeks. And my work was getting really, really hard and hectic. And I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I was at a crossroad. I was like, should I go full time on Master Talk? Should I just dump it and focus on the corporate job? And I had a lot of back and forth. But what happened in 2021, kind of after our show, is I did really well on Clubhouse when it was the thing for like 90 days. And I was able to get it was like a 90-day blip essentially.
Yeah, pretty much.
Right. And I was a part of the blip. So I was a part of it from the beginning. So I got a couple of clients through that app and a little bit from YouTube that I started making a little bit of money. And I'd probably replaced 20 to 30% of my income at that point. But Master's Talk was still pretty small. I think I was at like 70,000 subscribers or something, which wasn't so bad. But I wasn't making enough money to quit. And then in June of 2021, what happened was I got lucky with my business partner. He introduced me to like 5 or 10 new clients. And I realized at that point that I could go full time and make it work. So I quit my job and then I went full time Master Talk. So that's the first thing that happened. The second thing that happened is I almost ran out of money in September or October. So that's why my tip is always for new entrepreneurs, have a 6 to 9 month emergency fund, which I did thankfully for me, or else I definitely would have went to zero because I couldn't figure out client acquisition. So I got the first clients, Phil, but then I was like, okay, how do I do this? And then I figured out a strategy on LinkedIn that was starting to get me a bunch of clients. And then I was able to fully replace my income and make it work full time. And I think the last thing is now it's the vision. I think the vision has changed a lot since we started talking, which is now the vision is I want to be the next Dale Carnegie. You know, I think it's really powerful that I can share all of these communication tips really early in life. So I have a lot of life ahead of me to bring Master Talk to the world. And that is now my life's calling and pursuit full time.
Oh, I love that. I love that. So you had this moment where in June where you're like, okay, yeah, I can do this full time. What was the freeingness of walking into your 9-to-5 where you had been putting blood and sweat hours on hours in here and then walking into your boss's office and saying, yeah, here's my 2 weeks or I quit right then. Like, what was that feeling like?
Really stressful. I actually cried that day.
What?
And the reason is because I had a very different 9-to-5 transition than most people. Even if it was really hectic, I actually really liked the job. I liked the people around me. I think for me, the challenge, Phil, was changing my identity from the person who was going to be a successful corporate executive, which was my goal, and I was on track to doing that, to actually being a full-time entrepreneur, a YouTuber, some guy who coaches people on communication for money. Like it just didn't fit. And the other piece that was stressful that I forgot to mention is I was and still am up until another 6 months and then I'll be good. I'm the only sole breadwinner in my family. So I retired my mother with the money I was making at IBM, and I was paying my sister's education with the money that we were making. So cutting my salary by 70% was really stressful because if I didn't make it back like in 6 months, we're finished. So I was crying a lot.
Holy moly. That is, well, it is somewhat similar to other entrepreneurs who take that leap, with that are having like, you didn't have a budding family. You had, like, you're supporting your mom, you're supporting your sister, like you're being a good, dutiful son. So, like, it's a different family dynamic, but still, you're still helping your family through with your salary that you're all about to gamble that, hey, I can make this a full time. And you're like, getting down to the wire, you're like, oh shit, am I?
And it was close. It wasn't Elon Musk close, like with
Like, next
Tesla,
rocket, we're dead.
right? Yeah, it wasn't like that. Like I had a great relationship with the company. I could have went back,
Yeah,
but it would have been a big L if I didn't make it work. But thankfully, it all worked out.
that's great. I love hearing that. Like, the roll of the dice came out, which is great because you already knew, you already had it in place. It was just like corporate job was just getting in the way. It's just getting in the way. And plus, you come from that corporate world, so you understand the structure. You can structure your business in a proper way so it can grow to be a mega corporation to that Dale Carnegie level that you want.
You got it, man. And that's actually my 3 tips when quitting a job to do entrepreneurship full time, which is one, if you can't do the side hustle part time, there's no way you can do it full time. I just don't see that working because now I'm working all the time, but now I love it, so it's fine.
It's not
And
really work so much
yeah,
as, okay, I have to do this to pay the bills, but I'm getting paid to do this. Oh my God.
yeah, exactly. So that's the first piece. The second piece, Phil, is definitely the emergency fund. I had that emergency fund, and that fund saved me. Or else I 100% would have ran out of money. I wouldn't have figured out client acquisition fast enough, and I would have lost, or I would have taken out a loan, one or the other. The third thing, though, that a lot of people don't do is I was already making money before I quit. So I already had a proven product. I just didn't know how to sell more of it. Like I knew how to coach people, I just didn't know how to get enough people to do the coaching with me. And that's the part I figured out when I quit, but I'd still figured out a little bit. So it was enough for me to go full time. But most people don't have any of the three.
Yeah, no, it's very true. They don't have the patience, I think, what it is. Because you need that 9 to 5 just to put in that bills so that you can save up, bring all the money, and then invest in yourself to take it to the next level, get to that place where you're able to, like you said, where you're like, you're crying because you're like, I could leave, but what happens? Like, you're at that level of, do I believe in myself enough to go? And you pulled the trigger, and you're doing great, and you have a great vision because you do want to impact, you want to help people. Like on your website said, like, you're scared to start talking on YouTube, but how can you save the world if you're doing it by yourself with the videos you're helping people? So I love it.
No, I appreciate it, man. Yeah, exactly. For me, starting YouTube was never about money because I was just making videos in my mom's basement back in 2019 when I started it because I felt like nobody was sharing this information for free on the internet. And then it just so happened that as I was creating videos, it turned out that I could build a business in the back end, kind of like with your podcast, where you started it and then you realized, huh, like I could actually build something in the back end. And here you are. So it worked out for
Yeah,
both of
no,
us.
yeah, it worked out. I love that's one of the reasons I love reconnecting with a previous guest who has had the growth like you've had, a similar trajectory. We started a little around the same time, and we're hitting our stride now and succeeding in great things. Like, you were on Entrepreneur on Fire. I want to ask you, how was that process getting on Entrepreneur on Fire with John Lee Dumas,
For
the
sure. So
godfather of entrepreneurs podcasting?
So I got a little bit lucky, and you can copy the strategy. And I'm always transparent about how that happened. So there's a platform that I don't really recommend as a product because I want to make sure my reputation isn't damaged here, called Guestio. So Guestio is a platform that's good, but I think Podmatch is better as a platform that I used. So we have a very aggressive outbound strategy to get on shows. And it just so happened that John Lee Dumas's show is just one of the shows on the list that you could pitch to if you want. But the reason is very specific because it's the only big show that's on Guestio. It's because John Lee Dumas and Travis, the founder of Guestio, are really good buddies. So they knew each other, and he's an angel investor in Guestio. So I think what he's doing, I'm not sure, so don't quote me on this, or else I don't want to get into any trouble here. But basically, I think he's prioritizing the people who are pitching through Guestio versus through his website, right? So
Makes sense.
then we sent him, literally, dude, I sent him a template pitch. Like, it was just a template pitch that I was sending everyone. I was like, there's no way he's gonna say yes. So I just started pitching a bunch, and we started getting a bunch of shows, like I always do, a good A level shows. But then he replied and he was like, "Sure, yeah, just pay the fee and you're on." And I was like, "What?"
There you go.
That's it. You just gotta ask. So this year we're actually just gonna pitch every big show and see what happens with JLD's link. I'll let you know how that goes.
Please let us know. Come back in a year. We'll see how you are in a year. If you're not too big time, that is, Brenden.
You know what's funny though, Phil? This is something I'm kind of learning a little bit because the episode dropped like last week. Is it's so crazy how much more credibility I have now with that show.
Mhm.
Because it's just a 30-minute episode. It's one podcast, but it completely changes the game. Like now, whenever I say that, people think I'm like Jesus now, which is so weird. Because I'm the same person. I think the message I got from that though, which I think is a good takeaway for all of us, is you need to go in the right room where you know something will be valued. Status symbols matter a lot more than I thought they did. Like even with my YouTube channel, that's the best business card in the world. Like people see obviously we took a chance on each other 2 years ago,
Yeah.
honestly. But now it's like, okay, like when people see my pitches now, they go, oh, okay, like that count is pretty big. So they go, let's have Brenden on the show. And I just realized it's so important. The same thing with this, even if you have to pay to get it.
Mhm.
Which is kind of sad because I just wanted to impact people, but I've realized you got to pay up if you want to impact more people.
Sometimes, yeah, it's like I learned. I had the pleasure of interviewing a guy who helps grow Facebook groups, and he's like, the best way to do it is with paid ads because it's the only way to hit the mass audience because Facebook will prioritize those ads in those feeds. So once you start getting at a certain point, you'll hit a critical mass where ads really won't be necessary because the content will be pushing it to all the platforms. But yeah, you'll have to pay. Organic only works until a certain level, and then the pay comes in.
Correct.
Um,
And
go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
no, I was about to say exactly right. I think there's a balance between organic and paid. I think what we've done in our business that's worked really well because there's some things I've paid for, but
Mhm.
I've largely saved a lot of money in the process. I would say the biggest thing is people don't leverage their existing clients enough. So the way that I was able to grow my book pretty quickly, since I was broke 2 years ago when we first met each other, and I'm not so much anymore, is really because we get our existing clients who get great results with us to introduce their friends to our free training. So it's not even about directly referring them to coaching. It's about going, hey, Brendan's doing this cool free workshop. He's been on this cool podcast. Why don't you listen to it? Wow. So it just skyrockets the credibility. And Sharon Srinivasta says this great thing, and I love. He says, fame is the most efficient business model. And I think that's so powerful because when somebody sees you on a podcast, when somebody sees you doing a YouTube, when somebody goes to a free workshop that's like mind blowing, it increases conversions a lot faster. So that's what's worked with us in our business.
I love that. I love that piece of advice because yeah, I some of the people I follow on and they're building businesses and they help build marketing. They've just talked about how powerful podcasting is. It's the cheapest form of marketing. And you usually like you dropped it now and you've probably seen some results from the entrepreneurs on fire, either giving you that credibility or bringing people to you. But the real results come in 6 months. Tracked. So like in 6 months from now, like June of next year, you're going to be having so much more clients because the SEO and that will be working so much more for you. Oh my God. It's going to be interesting coming back to you in a year. I think this is a yearly interview, kind of like the Billie Eilish every year with Vanity Fair, but it's going to be a real yearly review with Brenden and see how he's going since the last time he was on the show.
For sure. I think that's the biggest lesson I learned this year, Phil, around paying for credibility, is because that's the best investment I think I've made this year. And the reason is because now in every of our podcast pitches, we just include that link. It like the conversions are unreal. Like it's crazy. people reply to you immediately and they go, "Oh, you were on that show? Oh, you must be really important." And I was like, "I'm not that important," but but if you think
Sure,
I
you are, because you're impacting people
oh, thank you,
with
man.
your
I appreciate it.
no, but it is your talks. Like, I really love going in and seeing when you dissect how someone speaks, or how the proper, like, your videos are a how to. So if someone wants to get better in presenting, your videos teach them. And if they're like, "Oh, I love Brendan Fraser, I'm going to follow," well, now I don't think you've done one on Brendan Fraser, but I think
Oh,
you
yeah.
did one on Tim Cook, right?
I did one on Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs, that's right. I knew it
Yeah,
was an
Tim
Apple
Cook
guy. I
is
wasn't
not.
sure.
He's not that great of a speaker, so I don't want to be.
No, he's a smart businessman, not that great of a speaker. But yeah, you did one on Steve Jobs, and if someone idolizes Steve Jobs, your video will actually help them learn to speak more like them and be more presentable like them. So you are impacting the world, you are changing the world, and you deserve to be on those podcasts because you are able to help people.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's this fascinating idea of like, even if you have the best product, because I've been grinding Master Talk since I was like, geez, 19. So it's been 7 years now, but I've been creating content for almost 4. And so it's like there's this 2 buckets of being a thought leader that I'm kind of figuring out as I'm maturing as well. One piece is like how creating great content, which unfortunately most people don't do well. So that's the
Mhm.
focus. But then the other piece is the marketing. How do you distribute that content in a way that other people get hold of it? Because the algorithm on YouTube ain't going to help you. It's really tough to crack that. So that's what I'm trying to figure out now. So it's going to be like podcasting. We're still testing out a bunch of strategies, but yeah, definitely leading with the right intention is so important. Like the impact that we're creating with Master Talk. Absolutely.
Has your why of starting Master Talk, sorry, changed since we last talked?
Massively, massively. Now I have a whole story behind it, which I'll share with you. But the why initially was just helping university students in my local community. I didn't even think this would be international. It was just I was graduating from those case competitions. Backstory for those who don't know, I used to do these things called case competitions. Think of it like professional sports for nerds. Other guys major playing like football, right? I was playing presentations competitively. That's how I learned how to speak. It was accidental because I wanted to be an accountant. And then as I got older, I started coaching all of those students on how to communicate ideas effectively. And I accidentally got good at communication coaching. That's what led to Masso. So that's the backstory. So what I realized when I started working at IBM in like April of 2019, I realized that I would get really busy and I wouldn't have time to coach the students anymore. So that's actually what prompted the Master Talk YouTube channel to begin with. I was just like, oh, I should probably just share them with these 80 people every year because I just can't make the time to coach them anymore. That was the thought. And then when I was making videos, now it's gotten a lot bigger. So now it's like this whole story that I'm happy to share. And the story is about Taylor Swift. So Taylor Swift in 2014, she wins an award called Woman of the Year film by a company called Billboard, the music company. And she looks at the crowd and goes, "Your future woman of the year is 11 years old right now. She's learning how to sing, she's in choir, and we need to take care of that girl." And then 6 years later, what happens? Flash forward, Billie Eilish wins Woman of the Year at the age of 17. She's barely a woman and she wins the award. So she gets up on stage. She's got a big, bulky jacket, big glasses. She looks at the crowd and goes, "Yo, what's up? Like, I don't know how to win this award." And then she keeps rambling. And then the last 30 seconds of what she shares, Phil, really changed my life and solidified my why in the process. She looked at the crowd and said, "Oh, yeah. And like in 2014, I was watching Taylor Swift's speech and I was 11 years old and I was in choir and I was learning how to speak and how to sing and how to share ideas. And you all took care of me. So thank you." Then she walks off stage. And the reason that blew my mind was because I thought about the next Elon Musk. Because when Elon was 12 years old, nobody cared about him. He was this kid in South Africa. He was being abused by his dad. No one was really helping with his communication skills. And I thought about the next Elon Musk, who might be a 7-year-old girl in Cambodia, who might be a 15-year-old girl in Utah. What are we doing for them? Are we creating resources for that person? So now the mission of Master Talk is to empower every genius of our society to become exceptional communicators, whether they can afford a communication coach or not, so that society, the human race, evolves at lightning speed.
Ooh. Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a lot better. I did a
Way
better
better.
job on the podcast from last week, but
Damn. That is gold right there. That is yeah, no, that's going to be great, especially with I am looking forward to seeing you hit that goal and inspire. I'm looking forward to having the next Elon Musk on my podcast and say they were inspired by Master Talk. That's going to be very exciting to happen because I'm going to continue this on until I'm 95 years old at least. Because this is like I love this talking to entrepreneurs like yourself, talking with the audience, learning about them is what I bring joy. It's like I'm never going to stop this podcast, regardless of how famous it gets. I'm never stopping this podcast.
You're gonna be a famous guy, so I'm glad I met you early too.
Remember, it's mutual here. Like every year, you're gonna have to come back on the podcast.
I'm down.
Done.
You know why you're gonna be famous? Because your name is easy to spell and mine really isn't. It's like Phil better. Well, I want to get better, so I guess I might as well listen to this.
Shh, don't tell anybody that. Brenden, as per usual, I always ask the 4 questions, but we've already gone through those 4 questions with you on the previous podcast. Well, actually 3 out of the 4. The 4th one is new. So I'm pretty sure you've heard of Yes Theory, correct?
Yes.
Obviously. And you know their clothing line Seek Discomfort, where their merch line Seek Discomfort. They had the game called Spark that was released. And it's 200 questions to spark conversations with strangers. And I went through them because I'm a huge supporter of their mission of like, you know, one, you seek discomfort to change yourself to grow. And it's like investing in yourself, which is basis of this show. So I bought the game. I went through the 200 questions, pulled out the 50 that relatively fit to entrepreneurship. And I'm going to ask you one of them.
Wow.
All right. So that's the last question I do because I want to be truly transparent, and it's to clip this question and use it to grow the podcast using the Yes Theory fandom because they're behind this thing and I'm supporting them because I talk about them on the show. This is great because you pretty much said it the whole episode, but tell me about a goal that you've already turned into a reality.
A goal I've already turned into reality. I would say for me, there's so many, but I would say the biggest one is definitely being a guest at Entrepreneurs on Fire. And the reason is because everyone that I looked up to, Lewis Howes was like my hero. I listened to his podcast since I was like 20. I met him, my business partner at his event, Tony Robbins, Gary Vaynerchuk, Scott Harrison, the CEO and founder of Charity Water. I like gift his book to like everybody. They all went from that day forward. They all went from being my heroes to being my colleagues because I joined that list of all of those people who were on the show. And that really solidified what I really want to do. Because in 5-10 years, you know, my goal to be on Joe Rogan, it will be to be on Lewis's show, it'll be to be on all of them. This was like that first real step to actually making that a reality. And I get it, and I'm honestly in awe of. It's crazy. I was able to do this so quickly, and I'm really grateful for the people around me, including the people like you who supported what I do and really believed in it to get me to this point. But there's a lot more to go, so we got to keep trekking.
Oh, I'm very excited to see where you're going. Brenden, I'm going to jump off the screen. I'm going to let you tell my audience where they can follow you, support you, and learn more about Master Talk. So, sir, the floor is yours.
For sure, Phil. Thanks so much for having me on. Such a pleasure. So 2 easy ways to keep in touch. The first one is definitely the YouTube channel. Just go to Master Talk in one word. You'll have access to hundreds of free videos on how to speak. And the second way to keep in touch is to attend one of my free communication workshops that I deliver over Zoom. So you get to see a lot of my tips that we talked about today. Well, not so much today, but just in general, because we talked about my story today. But if you want those communication tips, you want to see them live, just go to rockstarcommunicator.com and register for our next training.
Excellent. Of course, first of all, Brenden, thank you so much for coming back on the show. I'm looking forward to talking to you in a year and having you as a yearly tradition on the show. My audience, of course, the links will be in the show notes down below. Make sure you go check out Master Talk on YouTube. It is phenomenal. And remember to always invest in yourself.